ran close that season in the league title as well. We took it to the final day. If things have gone our way a little bit here or there, but of course, I think winning that first trophy is really important, and it just settles everything down, and you're then hungry for the next one.
The official Manchester City podcast. Watch the full video version of this show via City Plus now.
Hello and welcome to the official Manchester City podcast. I'm your host, George Kelsey, and we've got a special episode today. I'm joined by Nick Cushing and Gareth Taylor, two managers of our women's team since the professional relaunch. And I'll be joined by my co-host, Karen Bardsley, a legend in her own right as a player who's obviously still involved very heavily with the club now as Girls Academy manager. Really exciting podcast coming up, talking about the highlights from the past 10 years and also the exciting future, so stay tuned. We'll go through firstly from the beginning, always helps. You both obviously had quite a similar transition into becoming manager of our women's team, having worked in the academy beforehand. Nick, we'll start off with you. Can you just talk us through, if you can remember, that initial transition into becoming the women's manager, how you were approached and what you'd kind of done with City beforehand?
Yeah, I worked in the boys' academy for 7-8 years before I went into the women's team. I was predominantly with small-sided game, which was 5 to 8, and then 9s, 10s were the teams that I had in the boys' academy. And when I transferred over onto my coaching license, which is the A license, which is 11v11, I didn't have a team. I actually worked across. You worked 16s at the time, and I think Jason Wilcox and Gareth Wally were 13s and 12s. And I supported those two guys in the sense of they ran the teams, and I was just an extra coach that worked across there. And Scott Sellers was the academy director at the time. And this opportunity came up, and he just said to me, it wasn't actually a conversation, it was more of a, you're doing this, right, and you're going to go take this team. The women's team is coming in-house. It's going to be half professional, half semi-professional, because we were going to go and get some England internationals, some established WSL players, and we were going to marry that with the existing players that we were going to retain from the group. The team was sort of picked for me. It was Gavin Makel, Brian Marwood that built the team, and I was told in 3 months' time, it was around October, I think, 2013, I was told January 2014 that I was going to be taking the team and we were going to go enter the WSL and play. So I was 29 at the time, and it was a great opportunity for me, and one that I enjoyed, but actually was a real stepping stone for my career.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, it's a stepping stone and quite a significant step up as well. How did you cope and sort of find those first few months in the role before you kind of got your feet under the table?
I think initially I was really excited about the role because although I have a passion for developing players, I was a bit stale in the boys' academy, because when you take an under-9s team or you work with an under-12s team, the winning and losing is not really the main aim. It's the developing of players. And when you go and take a team and you play against a Sheffield United or a Middlesbrough and you lose, and there is no real pressure. I wanted to work at the top end of under-18s, under-23s, first team. When I reflect on it at 29, I wasn't ready, and I was probably far more ambitious than my capability. So given the opportunity to take the women's team, I was really excited. I was really comfortable taking the team, and I felt I was really honest with the team at the start, saying that I had no experience with women's football and I had no experience in the professional game. But I was excited and I was ambitious. Until we played the first game, we played Liverpool, who were the champions. It was live on BT Sport, and the first thing I did was come off the bus and went straight in front of the camera on BT Sport. And that's the moment I think I was like, this is different to what I've experienced, and the game was crazy. But the initial part was, when I reflect on it, probably wasn't as polished as it needed to be. We went to La Manga on pre-season, and I tell these stories all the time, that it was we had to do a lot of work on trying to almost develop the operation and the infrastructure around the team, because we had this team that was stepping up into being professional, but we also had really established England internationals that were coming here with really high standards, and our standards didn't really meet that.
Yeah. How did it feel for you, Karen? Because obviously he's talked about the internationals. You were one of them. How was it for you in those first
I remember
few months?
having some of those conversations with you, Nick, particularly around, like, I don't really know, the women's game, and, we playing against teams that were coming up, and you'd be like, oh, who's Kim Little? And we're like, dude, she's a legend, you know what I mean? So we kind of all have to upskill each other on, what to expect. And I think that was kind of reflected in the initial level of the performance when we brought the previous existing team up to, the WSL standard as well, because ultimately at times it just felt like there was a gap in quality without being disrespectful. And I think we really struggled at times to kind of integrate the methodology and the way that you wanted to play based on the quality of the players that we had at that time. So it was really iterative, like Nick said, we went away to try to work on these things, but it was all like hyper compressed into a very short space of time before we kind of got into the league. But I remember, just like being really impressed by, the initial kind of vision of what it is that Manchester City wanted to do with the women's team. And I think ultimately that ambition is what kind of drove me to want to be a part of the club. But yeah, initially it was just like, oh, okay, like we've got some gaps that need filling. But
I actually don't think people are really aware of how we reinvented the team in the first 2 months, because the initial plan, we literally scrapped the plan, but the initial plan was to have a part-time team that still worked but trained in the evening, and have 6 full-time players: Izzy Christensen, Betsy Hassett, Karen Bardsley, Jill Scott, Steph Horton, Tony Duggan. Those players were going to train in the day at the academy, and then we were going to train at night at Wright Robinson College as a team to develop the team and prepare for the games. And we realised after about 6 weeks that this wasn't working. It was the facility wasn't great. It just didn't work. So what we decided to do was we reinvented the team. We released a lot of the older players. We then brought in some younger players that were able to train in the day, and we then made the whole team train like a first team, which was 10 a.m. training, eat in the academy, and we got the support from the football club within the academy, which then meant that we actually ran as a professional football team instead of this sort of hybrid team that didn't work.
It must have been difficult as well, sort of, as you've kind of mentioned already, having established internationals and professionals that are there full-time, fully integrated from the start, and then players who are part-time having to work jobs, work in the evening and so on. So that initial period, it sounds like it must have been really tough even though we've got a solution in the end, it sounds like a really tough period to deal with actually at the start.
Yeah, I think what you've got a group of players that are really embracing this new environment, because it is much different to what it used to be. But then you've also got a group of players that are looking down, thinking, this is not where it needs to be. This environment isn't conducive of performance, because the international players came from the environment of an old central contract system where they were able to train full-time. They weren't training at 8 till 10 p.m. of an evening on a sports college. So it was almost like they felt like they took a sort of step backwards, whereas what we were trying to build was this football team that was taking a step forwards. We were going to be the team that was going to work in a way that was going to be inducive of a real entertaining style and a real professional football team. So we had to make some clinical decisions and some really decisive decisions really quickly for the good of the team, and to almost have the players think this was a great decision to come here, because they came from really established women's football teams like Notts County, like Arsenal, like Everton. So we had to make the decision really quickly.
I think it just showed that the landscape was changing really quickly in the women's game, and maybe people had a perception of what it was, and then ultimately when you get your hands into the the dirt, as it were, you kind of suddenly realize that actually no, it there's a level that in a certain standard, and I think what I'm trying to say is that the club recognized that, and it recognized that it needed fixing, and the club put it right and created an environment, where we obviously went on to win a trophy in our first season.
Just before we get on to that trophy, Gareth, you were obviously part of the academy at the time as well. From an internal, outside perspective, what was it like for you in those first few months when the women's team was relaunched and so on? What do you remember from that?
I remember a lot, because I was obviously under 16 coach at the time, and I worked closely with Nick in his kind of. He was taking a team. I remember you were taking the under 9s, and they moved you into this 12-13s assistant role. And I remember you being a bit naffed off at the time. And I said, "Come on, we'll make it fun, and we'll get around the sessions," because I had to line manage all of those people within that bracket, and Nick was one of them. I remember us going to Wrexham one day. I took you back to one of my former clubs, Wrexham. We had a good day there, and just give them a bit of a taster of, obviously, the day-to-day of what football looks like. And I think that period was really good for me as a coach, because like Nick said, it was like this hybrid model of pros here. And I'm glad you reminded me the names. I remember Bex Hassett now, and Tony was there, wasn't she? And obviously Jill and Steph and KB. But those guys would join in the training sessions. Do you remember at Platt Lane? These would join in the training sessions with the 16s.
They were so fun.
So
I actually think that's one of the things we did. And probably a little bit unconsciously did a lot of things that changed the perception of the women's teams really quickly. Like the internationals went in and trained with the boys. So the boys, because they saw their quality and the coaches worked with them, it actually moulded the environment really quickly. It became a real inclusive environment really quickly, I think.
I think that's a big point, though. I don't think yet you give yourself enough credit there, because I remember you were reiterating those points around challenging those perceptions, because we got fobbed off quite a lot. Just being in the environment, people kind of looked at us like, "Why are you here?" We had to really fight to kind of make sure that we actually belong and we got the respect that we deserved, to get to where it is today. But I remember joining in some of those sessions. I remember joining in Jason's Wilcox's sessions with the 18s and stuff like that, and they were absolutely amazing. I think my first week at the club, they took me over to, where was it? It was Carrington when we were still training. We
used to do 2 days at Carrington.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I went over there and joined in the small-sided games, and it was honestly like, I was like, this is what it's about. Like this is like the level that we want to be tested at, and I just kind of wish that the entire team could have felt that.
Yeah. How long did that go on for then, that period of training?
It was probably about 6-8 weeks, and then we realised really quickly that being in a sports college where there was a lot of the public there wasn't conducive to the way we wanted to treat our football players. I think that period was a really good period for me, because over that sort of transition of trying to go from small-sided to 11-a-side, I had really good relationships. Like Gareth, we went to Abu Dhabi, I supported you in the Rishworth, so I always had the opportunity to work with the 16s or the 18s, not in a formal way. It was only because the coaches gave me the opportunity and supported me. So when I took the women's team, they were really open to allowing the players to train and allowing me to be integrated within that department, because the department was like, Gareth Line managed 16s, 15s, 14s, 13s and 12s, and I sort of was just a sort of spare part in that moment, because there just wasn't a role for me. So when I moved to the women's team, I stayed sort of in the same role, just with a different team.
That relationship's already there.
Yeah.
Really important. Obviously, at the end of that first season, we get the trophy, the Conti Cup in 2014. There were a lot of big results en route to that, beating Chelsea in the semis and on the final day of the season as well. But this is a question for both of you, really. But firstly, with Nick, that first trophy, how significant did that feel for you at the time, just to kind of as a platform to then move on to bigger and better things?
Yeah, I think when I reflect on that, it's a great example of real team spirit and togetherness, because we didn't have so much quality. And I don't say that because we had bad players. We just had really inconsistent results. Our league position was, 7th maybe that year. So our league results were really inconsistent. But in a cup competition, and we're really lucky actually, because over my time of the Continental Cup, it bounced around from being group stage to knockout. So in that 2014, we lost the first game away to Doncaster Bells. If it was a knockout, we'd have been out. But because it was a league format, we managed to go. We beat Liverpool, we beat Everton. We then got through. We got Chelsea in the semi-final. We played at Hyde. That was when we used to do some of the games at Hyde.
That was so good.
And we actually changed the strategy of the game. We actually just sat in and played on counter-attack, because we knew they were strong. They were going to win the league that year. And we scored. We regained it. Tony scored. We managed to go to the final. And then even in the final, for the first 60 minutes, if we hadn't had KB in goal, we'd have lost the game 5-0. We were just pulling saves out everywhere. And I just think it was just meant to be. I have no explanation in how we won that trophy, other than we nicked a goal and we went on and won it. But I think what it did was, it did reinforce belief that we want to be an integral part of the development of the women's game. We want to be an important team in the WSL. But it was definitely team spirit and togetherness that carried us through that final.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was quite nice as well, because I obviously looked back at the highlights again this morning. I mean, as Nick said, some of the saves are ridiculous, firstly, so fair play. It was quite nice and quite poetic in a way that it's Crystal who puts the ball in, one of the players who was there before the relaunch, for Izzy, who's then obviously one of the marquee players. So just really nice sort of to show the transition between the original team and then the team that we then became as well. Just thought it was a really nice.
Yeah, I think that team had a really good balance of. I say a really good balance. When I say the results were inconsistent, it was probably because of the team. We had Georgia Brown played at right back. She'd never played, and we put her in the game because we just had injuries or we had suspensions. And like you say, Crystal Johnson played a lot that season. Abby McManus.
Yeah.
I tell you why Georgia played is because Abby got sent off in the Chelsea game, which was the last game of the season, for elbowing Yuki Agimi. She got sent off, which meant she missed the final. So then we had to throw Georgia in, who's 17, never played. I just think it had a good mix of, we just tried really hard and wanted to win really badly.
Yeah. And your first trophy, Gareth, was only a couple of months after you'd taken on the role, obviously the FA Cup. How significant did that feel for you, just sort of getting, again, as I've said it before, getting your feet under the table, really establishing yourself in that role?
Yeah, I think similar to what Nick says, it kind of just reinforces the belief a little bit around what you do. I mean, obviously Nick, we got locked down and Nick got us to the quarterfinals, so it was he did a lot of the hard work. But for me, if you remember, that was in the November the 1st, I think it was in 2021 maybe, or 2020.
One of them, yeah.
That was 2020, because
it
was March was the lockdown, so we were playing catch up. We had, I think, the following season 2 FA Cups, because they were rolling over. But yeah, of course, it was great, especially at Wembley. And I think it was weird sensation because we were behind closed doors with no fans. But it was great, and I think we ran close that season in the league title as well. We took it to the final day. If things had gone our way a little bit here or there. But of course, I think winning that first trophy is really important, and it just settles everything down, and you're then hungry for the next one.
We've then talked before about obviously the importance of those key established players from the start, Steph, Jill, Karen, just to name a few. How important were they for you as well in those first few months in the role, just to help you out?
Yeah, massive. I mean, like Nick was saying, he's probably more open about it than I am, but I made a lot of mistakes, definitely. I think I was really fortunate that I was literally, while Nick was in that role, and certainly when we moved here to the CFA, that we were working alongside each other on the pitches. We were in the same dressing room, so I was hearing some of his frustrations, he was hearing some of mine at under 18 level, and some of the things that we'd get excited about, which was always the football. But of course, I think you make errors because you kind of come in with your ideas of how you want things to work, and then you actually get to the bottom of things and find that, like Karen was saying before, that we need to improve things. We need to improve so many things, and some of them were general things in terms of allowing the players to be the very best versions of themselves. Whether it be basic how we travel, how we use our nutrition, how we train, how we're able to train. I think those are really important things. But what I did find was that there was incredible honesty from the players, from the group. Our staff turnover was quite high in many areas, and the game was changing right before our eyes. It was changing so much, and from that period of no supporters being able to come through the turnstiles to the following season, to go to Sky Sports showing more games, to now showing pretty much all of the games, and supporters coming back into the stadium, I just felt that there's been such change. And obviously with the Lionesses winning, with the type of exposure now that the women's game rightly gets, and I think it's only going to improve, it's just incredible where it was and where it's kind of come to. And even before that, obviously looking at Nick's journey and the cycle of the team, but I was really aware of all of it, and I was a big supporter for Nick and a big supporter for all of the guys, because we were so close and we were working literally alongside each other every day.
I suppose the CFA and the move to there has sort of only enhanced that as well, obviously, because the academy and the women in particular are so well integrated. Have you felt it's sort of continued as well, and the CFA was a massive part of that? Yeah,
it was. And I think, like Nick was saying, he's able to kind of draw on resource potentially that wasn't set just for the women's, and I think it's a great place to be, this place that you can have those discussions, and they could be at different levels. We have our men's first team on site, we have our women's first team on site, and all of the academy staff and teams that are within it as well, and the community as well. So there's so many people that you come across on a day-to-day basis, and of course, they've all got their own things going on, and they're really highly stressed about the game or the performance that's about to happen. But I think it's great being able to have those touch points with people in this type of environment.
If I may as well, like being in the CFA as a player, I think Nick used to reiterate this part a lot around having Rado, who I believe was he the technical director when we were
head
there,
of coaching.
And then he obviously
Head
head
of
of
coaching,
coaching, right?
yeah.
And then he ended up moving over to the men's first team side, didn't he? Like, I remember that you would always try to reiterate the point that there's a vast amount of knowledge in this building, and you shouldn't be afraid to go and ask questions to try to further your understanding of the game, or, you know, see pictures a bit more clearly. And I think, you know, at times, yeah, we do kind of get so caught up in what it is that we're doing that we forget that those amazing, incredible resources are there. And so I think that is something that, you know, we can continue to kind of push going forward. But it is actually incredible when you think about the people that have like come into that building every single day and what they've experienced, and you two and how you've worked together. And like, I used to see you guys all the time in the gym, like after our sessions, and we'd be kind of crossing over, we'd catch up, find out what you guys were doing. And yeah, those types of conversations are like, they demonstrate obviously kind of what the impact that being in one building can have. But then also I think the impact that integrating a women's team into an academy can have on the boys teams as well. They're there in terms of, you know, the social side of, you know, just getting used to having like women around, but also like the perception as well that it's completely normal, and how that impacts on generations, you know, moving forward. And the big piece around the social change is obviously really big. But yeah, it's certainly been a real special environment for me to be a part of.
Absolutely. I was literally about to ask what it was like from a player perspective. You
Well,
took
you're
it
welcome.
out of my mouth. Yeah. I suppose it's a good time to talk about your new role as well, Karen. Within as much as you're obviously able to say, because you obviously start in the new year, but as Girls Academy manager, how important do you feel that the environment that's already at the club is going to be to help you achieve the vision that you and the club want to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, representing Man City and having, you know, the honor to do that is something that I'm incredibly grateful for, not only as a player, but now moving into a more, you know, a role with a bit more influence. And ultimately for me, I just want the players that come through the academy to have the best opportunity they can possibly have to achieve their fullest potential, you know, whether that become obviously to become a professional footballer, but, you know, to develop as a human being as well, and have the life skills that prepare you for the rest of your life during your career and post career as well. I think, like, obviously Man City have the resource. We've seen what they've done with the boys academy, and obviously the men's and the women's first team as well. But for me, it's about pushing excellence. You know, I want to win trophies. I want to get these girls prepared for first team football, whether that's, you know, obviously I'd like it to be at the top level, whether it be the women's first team, but also the Champions League level. Preparing these players for international representation as well is incredibly important to me. But I've been reflecting a lot on my experiences in professional football, and there's a lot of things that I would like to make sure that, you know, they don't experience, you know, and making sure that it's approached from a more holistic perspective as well, because that's really important.
Yeah, Gareth, obviously you're going to be working closely with Karen in her new role. How important is it for you, not only someone that you know, respect, and obviously has a really good knowledge of the club and
you're
football?
putting words in his mouth.
He needs players. He needs players. He needs some players.
I'm doing my best.
Yeah, how fast can you work?
Yeah.
To be fair, though, I got to give credit to Jane. You know, like with
of course, yeah.
You know, she's brought the academy a very, very long way and managed to get some real great processes and real great people in the academy from what I've seen so far. And, you know, there are some fantastic kids coming through it, you know, the under 12s, under 14s. It's just, you're right. Like, we just need to get them to grow up a bit quicker, you know?
Yeah.
How exciting is it to be working with
Yeah,
Karen
it is.
on
It's
that role?
great. I think it's really important that we retain good people, and Karen's certainly that, as well as giving so much as a player. I think she's going to do great in that role. I think it's really important that we support her in the right way, because it's a big job. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of changes, like we were talking about at the top end. I also think at academy level as well, the rules seems to change quite a bit that allow you to do a work in a certain way. But yeah, I think being a part of, and Nick was the same when in its inception, and when we first started doing St Bede's in the boys academy, you know, that was a real game changer. And I think it's trying to be ahead of the pack as much as you possibly can, and doing something different that hopefully is going to see results 5, 6, 7 years time. And that's the exciting part. And I think, like we were saying before about where the women's game has gone with the availability and the visual attendances and everything else that we're seeing, is allowing young girls to be able to have a platform of not necessarily playing in boys' team and then having to stop when they're 12, actually having their own teams and having their own route and pathway to come through, I think is really exciting.
It must give you a lot of pride as well, Nick. Obviously, you were with Karen from the start when she joined the club. To see her then go on to the role she's doing now, but as Gareth said also, the opportunity for young girls, not just at City but around the country, to have those opportunities now compared to 10 years ago must be a really nice feeling.
Yeah, I think one of my reflections is the game is different now. The game is far more developed and far more difficult than it was when I started in 2014. The level of player, the standard of teams has really improved. What the growth of the game brings is, for this guy, a far more difficult job in trying to win. Man United were one season. There was no Aston Villa. The Tottenham Hotspur were in the initial inception. So, I was fighting Arsenal and Chelsea. The three of us were fighting for 2 spots. And we sort of bobbed around. Now it's 4, 5, 6 teams. You look at the results. If I look at 2014 through 2018, the league was won and lost on head-to-heads. Because everybody beat everybody, and then it was Chelsea, Arsenal, City. Who's going to win the head-to-heads? And then Man United come in and sort of had a go. And, I don't say Casey done an incredible job, but it was still us three fighting against each other. And now you look at the results across the league, and, if you can drop points against a really good Aston Villa team, Tottenham Hotspur beat Arsenal. There's teams, Liverpool are beating Man United. So, that is really good for the game. Like I say, it just makes the job more difficult. One, for Gareth to get results consistently, but also for KB, because the players that she has to produce have to be of the level to play the game now. Whereas the players that you had to produce in 2014, you're producing the pool is far smaller. Now, when I was the head coach, and I thought it was difficult, but ultimately, we lost a lot of players to America. Leon took Izzy Christiansen, took Lucy Bronze, took Nikita Paris. Now all of those players want to come and play in our league. And this is amazing. But like I say, it means that the younger players now have to be developed to a far more higher standard, physically, technically, tactically, socially. But I also think KB will be incredible at this role because, one, she's been involved in it. She's lived it at an international level. She's lived it within our club, so she has our way in her blood, but also she went through an incredible education process while she was finishing. So not only does she have the desire to do it, she also has she's got real high capability. So I think it's an incredible appointment, and I think for us the next stage is to have our own on the field. If we can have our own, look at our goalkeeper now, is amazing to see. Because that you have somebody that has been invested in the process, the fans will love. It's to me, it's what we do best. You look at Phil Foden, it's what we do best, and it's what we're going to continue to do.
We've obviously got to talk about the derby, the Manchester derby. There's been some incredible games and results that you've both overseen. Karen, you've been a part of as well. Nick, the first one, the Etihad. Gareth, you obviously had the same experience a couple of years later, but for you, Nick, what was that experience like from the build-up through to the actual game itself?
The build-up was good. Obviously, it's an exciting game. We know Manchester United had decided to have a women's team, and then coincidentally, we played them on the first game of the season at the Etihad, which was worked really well. We knew they were going to be a good team. They recruited really well. They actually recruited Abby McManus, went and played there. Who was one of our players, and ultimately it's a Manchester derby, and it was in the Etihad. And the one thing that I can remember really clearly was I just hammered it home. We cannot lose this game. And I had a team as well with the likes of Jill Scott, Steph Horton, those type of players that even if we don't play so well, we'll grind it out. I was so confident with that team in that game. And we had the quality of a player like Caroline Rea that can change a game, and she did it so often. In actually that game, she did it so often. I think when I went to New York, I would watch the games, and she scored those 2 incredible chips. So, and I think for us, it's a little bit different now because you see the stadiums, the game has grown. For us to play in the men's stadium and have the amount of fans that were there, we were lucky enough to do it in 2 FA Cup finals, but you didn't do it in a league game. It was fairly new, so the pressure was on. We didn't play so well in the start of the game. We turned the ball over a little bit. They had the first chance of the game. I remember Ellie making a really good save in the game to keep us in it. I think it was from Jane Ross as well, actually, who was our striker. But then to score the goal to get the win, I think was, it was a great occasion, a great feeling, and one that, like I say, we had to win, so I was happy we did. Yeah.
Similar with the Etihad derby that you've been in charge of, Gareth, where it was maybe the first half we didn't quite hit our usual standards, but then the second half, I mean, obviously I'm going to have blue tinted glasses on, but there was only one team that was going to go on and win it.
We were nervous. I I didn't really enjoy the experience, if I'm honest, because we didn't win. We didn't win, but there were reasons why. It was kind of like, felt like although it was our home venue and it was a fantastic occasion to get all of the supporters in like we did, and it was great. I think the girls were left feeling afterwards that, can we do it again next week? That was the kind of feeling. Obviously a different feeling, the game we played a few weeks ago at Old Trafford, which was the first derby played on their soil, and we did amazingly well that day. So yeah, it was a little bit... I was a bit like disappointed with our performance, and I don't know how you felt kind of going into it, because you don't train there the day before or anything like that. I mean, it was December the 11th, the game we played last year. It was really icy at that time as well. And did you have any preparation in the stadium at all? Or?
No, we didn't train there. We'd played there once before in the first season. We played Everton, but it was like there was only one side of the stadium was open. It was completely empty. It's completely different when you've got 28, 30, 35, 40,000 in there. Yeah, I don't think you ever do. I don't think you ever do really enjoy those big games because you have such a desire to want to win.
Yeah.
If you win it, it's a little bit relief. If you draw it, you're really flat, and if you lose it, you're devastated. So actually, it's just a process you have to go through to just get through it. And I think those big games, finals, and that what I found is you never really play that well. It always seems to be a fight, and whichever team comes out on top, there's a bit of luck involved in it. Of course, individual ability like a goalkeeper save or a really good finish, a really good goal. But yeah, we didn't really have much preparation time, and ultimately because it's so foreign to, because we don't do it every week, you just dropped into a situation that's completely different, and you just got to cope.
I think, to be honest, though, from a player's perspective, it doesn't really matter that much. You know, like maybe this is because I've been at that level, you know, previously with England and things like that. Being at a big ground doesn't really sort of put you off. But I remember back in 2012 with the Olympics, and we were playing Brazil at Wembley. They asked us if we wanted to go and train, you know, at the ground the night before, and basically it was miles away from where we were staying, and it was just like this massive faff, and it was going to eat into our like recovery and stuff like that. And we all just kind of pulled together and go, well, you know, we're going to make this decision together, and actually if we're not going to train there, we better win. So, you know, that ended up obviously like happening and coming to fruition. But I think now, like, it's credit to the girls in terms of how much the game has come along, that you expect or you understand now what it feels like to play in front of 30, 50, 60,000 people. And, you know, it's the way the game has grown, and it's become kind of normalized. But my reflection on those Manchester derbies, like, unfortunately I was injured for almost all of them. And but like just the pride of kind of seeing the stadium fill up, like obviously I was really emotional about, you know, how the performance was going to go, particularly like with Ellie performing well in that first one as well, and the nature of the goal and everything like that. I remember coming away from going, you know, like that was absolutely amazing. Yeah, the performance wasn't great, but ultimately we did the job on that day, and sadly we didn't do it, but I was at the game as well at Old Trafford, and that was an incredible experience to go to Old Trafford and like watch the disappointment like slowly kind of emerge on the faces of all those United supporters going, oh no, like this isn't going how we thought it would. So that was really cool, like just from a supporting standpoint.
Did it feel different, Old Trafford to the Etihad, Gareth, in terms of preparation on the game itself?
Yeah, it did, because obviously, you know, you're the away team, you're there, you know, obviously the majority of the supporters are going to be in red. Although we had fantastic support there on that evening. Yeah, it was kind of like a surreal experience, really. And it's only probably, I mentioned this in another conversation I had with someone, which was like, probably didn't dawn on you the enormity of it, or actually what we actually did until I got home and sat on the sofa. And it was, because the rest of the time it's like you don't enjoy it, like Nick I say the same. You don't really enjoy the game so much. You feel like we're having elements of control, but you're always on the edge, and all it takes is a refereeing decision. And we went down to 10 players as well, which we had to manage. I was thinking this would be great here, 3-1 up. You know, let's enjoy this last 15 minutes. Next thing, Laya gets a red card. You have to kind of like get your thinking cap on again, and
it's a long walk as well.
It never works like that.
No, it doesn't. But it doesn't.
Never give you the last 15 minutes.
No, it doesn't.
Those big ones.
But you manage it really well. Like,
well, we've had experience of it.
No, exactly.
We've had experience of it. And I got off a Pep when he went down to 10 men against Forest early in the season. I was really like, he's gone to back five here. He's gone to a 5-4-1, and I was like, wow, you know. Forget like building up from the
whatever
back.
It takes, huh?
Yeah, get more defenders onto the pitch. And like I say, it happened to us at West Ham. It's happened to us against Chelsea, and also happened to us against United. And fortunately, we came out of that with good performances. But when you're able in that United game to bring on Steph Houghton into the middle of defence, who's really going to show leadership and help the young players around her who've maybe not been in that type of situation before. But you forget, like Karen said, there's so many players now who are international players who've played at top stadiums, and not empty stadiums anymore. They're filling up. I was fortunate enough to go to the World Cup, and it was just an amazing experience to see full stadiums and players, playing great football in big stadia.
Just before we finish, though, I just wanted to ask you both for if you had a particular highlight or like a real major moment that you really look back on. Obviously, for Nick, it's easy for you to look back with pride because you're with New York now. Gareth, it might be a bit more difficult because you still live in it. But if there's a particular moment, starting with you, Nick, that you really look back on and think, yeah, you know what, I'm really proud of that one.
No, because there's far too many. I think there's cycles. The first trophy, when I speak to the players, especially the sort of former players, the more experienced players, Karen, Jill, Scott, Steph, they will always say the first trophy. Jill always says to me the first trophy is the most special. I don't actually think I do love that trophy, but Wembley is a very special place. You go to Wembley and you walk up the steps to lift an FA Cup. We actually were 3-0 up at half time against Birmingham. So like you're getting in at half time thinking this is absolutely this is a gift. So, I think that was special. If I'm really honest, when you said to me about the trophies being that moment of belief, I think 2018 was a big year for us because we were top in February. We were top of the league. We were in the Champions League semi-final. We were in the Conti Cup final against Arsenal, and we were in the FA Cup semi-final. We lost the Conti Cup final to Arsenal, which is the only final I lost, which was I actually believed I owned winning then. So it sort of like smacked me in the face. We got knocked out by Lyon in the Champions League semi-final. Chelsea beat us in the last minute, Frank Kirby, in the FA Cup semi-final. And then we blew the league at Chester City against Liverpool. And I actually think that was really difficult. And then in 2019, we went and won the double. We won at Sheffield United. And if you watch the video, when we put the last penalty in, Janine Becky puts the penalty in, the camera comes onto me and I put my head in my hands on the drinks container.
Yeah.
Because I actually think that was the moment that I thought I believed I'd never win again. And in that moment, I learned so much that actually no one always wins.
Yeah.
And actually, just because you win finals, when you lose one, it's not failure. It's really disappointing. But there's 2 more next year, and there's another opportunity to win a league. And this team will always be there, whether it was when I was the coach or when Gareth is. Look at them now, fighting. They'll be there till the end because this is a special football team. So I actually think that moment, we then go and played West Ham in the FA Cup, and we managed to win the double, the 2 cups that year. So I actually think that season was a really, really important season for me personally.
Absolutely. I mean, you were the hero at Bramall Lane, weren't you?
That was such a good day. I mean, such a great weekend.
This is a crazy thing. Like little insight is Ellie played quite a lot that season, and I just knew I could rely on KB in the big moment. She played in the FA Cup final as well. And made a massive save. That might have been Jane Ross as well for West Ham.
The header,
at
She has
0-0.
some clubs, Jane Ross.
They had the first chance, and it was like a 4-yard header that KB made a save. And it was difficult on Ellie because she played a lot that year. But in those big moments, I just had to make a clinical decision and KB made all the saves in the penalty. And if you watch it back, I actually watched it back this year, and she's banging the gloves like this.
Yeah.
And as she's banging the gloves, you can see the Arsenal players just literally, she looks so big in the goal, and they just missed. It actually was really important. She played in those games and was massive.
That was big for me, I mean, personally, because there was so much going on. Picked up loads of injuries at the very beginning of the season at Chelsea away. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I got tabletop basically by Kira Walsh.
Yeah.
I think she was trying to
Went off on
protect the ball. Got stretchered off, went and had like C-spine like scans and all that stuff. So Ellie came in literally 5 minutes in the game and had to, keep us in it, didn't she?
Yeah,
0-0.
she played really well in
She
that
did.
game.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, like my England career was on the line. So I was just like, we had some difficult conversations that season, but I had to do whatever was best for me to get to the World Cup as well. Cause I felt like, you're not getting any younger here, KB, you know what I mean? So to be given the opportunity to kind of show myself in that big moment was massive for me. But it's just so funny because like that weekend I just received my like dissertation results as well for my degree. So like it was all coming up roses, and then that happened. And then it was just the perfect way to get sent off to a World Cup. Like genuinely, I was on cloud 9. I thought there was nothing I couldn't do.
Yeah, I remember that just before we move on, ask your highlight, Gareth. Remember the Conti Cup final? Remember when you saved one? You absolutely smacked the goalpost as well. Yeah, I remember watching that at the time, but then also looked back and I was like, how have you not broken your hand there?
I thought that was kind of stupid, actually, when I did that. I was like, I shouldn't have done that.
God, imagine. Just finally, Gareth, if you have a highlight from your time as manager.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that first trophy at Wembley, it was a shame that obviously no supporters were able to be there and your family's not able to be there. And, you know, I've looked back on you guys winning the FA Cup previously and West Ham and Birmingham, wasn't it? Those two, which were both where supporters are in the stadium as well, which is amazing. So you kind of felt a little bit robbed with that. And obviously the other trophy win in the Conti Cup against Chelsea.
You played really well in that.
That was such a
yeah,
good game.
yeah. We had to really
Brilliant
fight in
Such
that
a good
game, and you know, Caroline played a big part in it again. But yeah, they're great, and I think those are the big moments. And then obviously that season as well, we lost the FA Cup final in a supporter-filled stadium, so I got my wish, but didn't get the win. And yeah, that was another one where like Nick says, sometimes like the scars are the things that kind of drive you on. But yeah, many fantastic moments, and it's crazy really that I'm gone into my 4th season. I just can't believe where the time's gone. And I remember seeing Nick racking up year after year, getting to about 6. So for the 10 years, you did about 6.5.
Yeah.
And I've split the other.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
But because it changed. With the 2014, 2015 seasons were summer seasons, and then it
season, yeah.
changed. So I think I did 6.5 seasons in the end. Yeah.
Well, Nick, Gareth, Karen, thank you so much for your time today. As I said, I could speak to you for the next. Could be doing a 20-year anniversary podcast by the time I'm finished. But thank you so much for your time, all of you. Really
Cheers,
appreciate it, and hopefully a lot more exciting memories to come.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Oh, yeah, that too.
It's going out in January.
All right.
Oh, cut that, Tom. He's good.
Keep it in.
He's good.
The unbeatable official Manchester City podcast. Watch the full video version of this show via City Plus now.